Hi, welcome to Honesty is the Best Policy Hour. Honesty is maybe the worst policy. It's one of the worst policies. It's like the policy of honesty. It gets really political. Um, Honesty, that's the best rules. That's like the best government. Honesty, that's one of the best policies around. I wonder who polices honesty. They better have some pretty good police. The honesty police. The honesty police, they better be pretty good at their job because they really have to hold people to like, it is currently time to be honest. You're especially, especially when you're under the palm, hands, within the hands of the law. Under the palm, within the hands. The legal team, the legal resources of honesty. If you're the honesty police, you really have a lot of work to do. You better figure out because people lie overall. In general, altogether, it was understood that people do lie, and it has happened. It has happened before. One person lies, and then you just get a whole herd of liars. Maybe it's contagious. Like you hang out with liars, and then you become one. I guess that must be what happens. Or like you seek out lying. People like to be around people that are lying, but it's kind of subjective what you'd call a lie. But it's like illegal. Legality tries to make it obvious what is a lie. They're like, well, we do need rules so that then it can be obvious when somebody lied as opposed to that they told the truth. That is not part of it in reality. Not my reality. I don't know what I'm supposed to do about legalism. They're like, well, I can't really be against the law because the world is probably just going to be operating by laws as long as I'm alive, and there's really only so much I could do. But I can dream, I can hope, I can have fun. It's just that strict adherence to the law. That's for law followers. But the law makes it so that they're like, well, we need to know when something's a lie and when it isn't. That's what the law needs to do. That's what they figure out. That's what they're like, now once it does this, then it's a lie. It's just that what if we lived in a world where people didn't care if you lied or they valued it? They should consider that, but it's probably going to move towards that. It's just that there are people, like, you can't ignore that culture forever, that community of people. You can't ignore them forever. The liars, people who seek out lying friends, or because there's some groups of people, it's just that you're maybe an honest person or you're a liar, but you might seek out liars if you already are a liar. But if you're an honest guy, you're going to try to seek out honest people to make friends with and spouses and whatever. It's just like, it's a matter of characteristics. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. That's what this podcast is about. It's the I'm not saying one is better than the other podcast. It's like good is evil and evil is good. It's some things are positive, some things are negative, but I mean, I prefer positivity, but I just wonder whether or not people admit it enough when they are negative people, or they realize that they are that. But maybe someone would say that I was negative, and that's just a judgment. That's just an image that comes back to you, like that's just feedback or potential data, and it's really like an image only says so much. Like somebody said that I was negative. It's just such like unlimited, like from one person out of billions and billions of people that live. One person tells you one thing about yourself, and like if you just don't collect enough data, then you would be inclined to like make a bigger deal out of whatever somebody was calling you. If you didn't hear enough things from everybody else around you, then you would probably just stick with the couple things that you did hear. And so it's like um, people's words affect you, people's judgments affect you because you do have to listen to what other people are telling you about yourself because you can't see what you're doing. But also, there's like not even, it's not like they're right. And it's just limited to listen to any one of them. I don't, I don't prefer when noises get made in response to just me making noises. I don't, just from whoever it is, don't really like my dog that much all of the time. He's fine. Doesn't matter. Um, it's just that like if I wanted to talk about him, all that he cares about is being seen, and I don't like that. Why would I want to live with a thing that did that all of the time? That it's ridiculous, like time constraints that we put on this. Like, why do people think they can have relationships with dogs? I don't really understand. And but really, um, why should they? Why should they think that? I think it's like it's ridiculous that I'm around this dog 5 days of a working week. And then the weekend comes, and oh, what do you know? The fucking dog is going to be here the entire day. Why do people put up with this bullshit? Can somebody explain it to me? And everybody acts like it's the greatest thing on earth when it isn't. There's no way that it's like that for everybody. I don't know what the fuck is the deal with the conspiracy of making sure that we're all saying very positive things about about this animal that for whatever reason leeches its way into our lives. God, it's like I could never, it's just a never ending well of negative things that I could say about dogs and having one. And it's just a negative way of looking at things, but certain things inspire negativity inside me. And I can't get rid of those. Um, why would I? And like, don't, it's not that being sad or like being happy is better than being sad. So of course it is, it's more sad to talk about negativity or be negative. But even if you start to say that something is sad in a genuine way, people are uncomfortable with that. You kind of have to pretend that something's sad. Because if you're really talking about that something is sad, then it gets kind of sad. Like if you were really behind the emotional relationship between the word sad and like what you're supposed to feel when you're talking about it. Like, there's probably some words that when you talk about them, then they just bring on the emotional aspect. But I would say that it's a little bit dishonest to be totally disassociated with the word, like display no emotion at all for something that you're talking about. And even to the point of saying a word and then when that word should, like specific words should bring up specific emotional reactions. Definitely the people in the apartments around me don't like it when I talk full volume for an hour because they get real antsy. And it makes me nauseous that people are so fucking impatient and self-absorbed that they think that no, that whatever that they would think that they would have any control over what I do. It's so fucking dumb when people fucking say that they just get to decide things, like out in public. Like when anybody comes up with a set of rules that you're supposed to do out in public, it's a totally different thing when in private. I'm just paranoid. I don't know that they make noises because of me. I'm a paranoid person, always been that way. And, um, oh no, they might just be having a good time. Let me listen for a minute. No, I'm not a weirdo at all. I'm not paranoid at all. I'm a normal guy, and I just like carry on my life. I don't even pay attention to anything. And like most things I actually don't pay attention to, but for some reason it's something I bring on myself, like an excuse to get me out of saying what I want to, or like blaming things on other people or my circumstances. That's what I'm getting into. It's like I'm looking for a way out or something. I gotta blame other people, like they're trying to make me stop talking. It's all in my head, but um sets of laws, and it's like I'm just battle waves of negativity that come in with positivity, and then when I feel more positive, then I say more words in a shorter duration of time. And we're talking here about something like frequency, and then if you like, the higher your energy output, the higher your frequency. Like that's what a gamma ray is for. But a gamma ray is such a much higher frequency than like a radio wave. And so when radio waves go through the air, they don't like blast through you and kill you. I don't know, maybe a gamma ray would, no matter what it is, in any scenario, would kill you if it went through you. But people have to come up with some set of rules for out in public. It's just that there's different ways of going about it. Like it used to be, I feel like liberalism is the new medium through which you get to govern other people out in public, as if like if there's something you're allowed to stand by and invoke, like a set of rules that makes it so that you get to tell other people what to do, uh just um just out in public, even though in reality, of course, you don't get to tell them what to do. But there's always there's always something in the air in terms of rules. One of like liberalism is the new way of doing that, where there's all this that people are think that they're supposed to do, like all this that humans presume that they're supposed to do to uphold and respect each other, like all these unwritten rules, like the new unwritten rules, like way of carrying out, telling other passive aggressively telling other people to do social things, or just people being controlling, or actually saying something that's like, oh, you can't do this. Anything like people that still want it to be that you can't smoke weed in public, they will make it so that um, they're going to make it so that they have a way to tell you to not, even though it's like it's too late for that. Liberalism is sort of the new way to do that, like, oh, human decency, and like it's the new way of saying, oh, humans all need to be decent and carry out like common sense, even though there isn't anything you can do about uh, outliers that wouldn't like you don't there's nothing you can do about people that don't follow unwritten rules, and are not going to listen to other people, especially like little comments. Like the way that you get to make little comments and in your brain be above everybody around you now is liberalism. It used to be like Republicans. It used to be conservative Christians, but then Christians became liberals. I would say is sort of what happened. Like mainstream Christianity became very liberal. I've seen it. I've been watching it happen. I watched it happen to people at my college. Like they turned liberal, and it was disgusting. And the evils that befell the university when the students, like the fervency of liberalism was stirred up in their hearts, so that a fire burned forth into the world. But like that's what every university is saying is happening at their university. Like we're lighting a flame that's burning forward. So lighting forest fires on the West Coast. That's what they say at West Coast ones. We are, this is the spark that lights the torch. And the global impact will be a glowing light that shines round because we're international and we're a universities, like it really is pretty universal, isn't it? Because every one of them is going to like try to say that we have grad students in every place that's ever been seen by any human mind, including the moon, including we have pictures of Mars. We have, yeah, like Texas A&M has students that are living on Mars right now. That's how international they are. But that's every university. It's the same with Boston College. Like they have grad students in every province in Canada and every planet, including Jupiter. And Jupiter doesn't even have. It's just made of gas. So, like, pretty fucking stupid of them. They probably should have rethought that. Hey, oh, look at us, we're Jupiter. I guess that's why, where that rhyme comes from, that it rhymes with stupider. I guess that is why. It's because it's just made of gas. You can't even go in there, really. And you'd have to be really stupid to be in there. Like, to head to there. It's not much of a destination. For one, it's also really far away. Like, that you would go try to vacation in Jupiter. I don't think so. And their tourism board is just straight propaganda. And you really shouldn't pay attention to it, but it's like, it's almost completely bullshit, like, that anybody would try to go there. My friend was thinking about it, and because her boyfriend convinced her that it would be cool, but I was like, oh, I can't believe people still think that it'd be cool to go and be within Jupiter and its atmosphere when everybody is known. Like, there's just so much ignorance around it. People willingly ignore it. Uh, there's just so much ignorance that you're going to ignore, like, that the atmosphere of Jupiter is minus 300 degrees Celsius all the time or whatever. People still like to think, oh, it's cool. Like, oh, yeah, would it be cool when you were frozen and you overdosed on the atmosphere in Jupiter? Would that be cool when all your friends and family had to bury you? Um, because everyone always acts like, let's go there, like it's a destination. Makes me, but it's because of stereotypes, like Jupiter's makes you stupider, and it's like just willing ignorance at that point when you see, but when you see that it's gets to that point. But people need some laws that they need to enact, but it's kind of like liberals. They started to be able to call them liberals, and they started to call them that. It's kind of like in the year 2000, everybody was calling those things just Republican and Democrat. And then by the year 2008, things would have evolved, and we're like, especially by 2012, when we're using liberal and conservative as adjectives for these groups of people. But then by 2016, and especially by 2020, now the adjectives that you're using, because people are just saying conservatives are Republicans, like conservative is an adjective for Republican, liberal is this sort of adjective for Democrat. And by 2020, it's like almost evolved that we're just calling them the noun, where the adjective has taken over property of the entire group of people, because now we gradually start to use it as a noun to describe these things, where like in 2000 we didn't really, at least not as much, not very much. But really what happens is you can see it in the 2016 election when Donald Trump won all the Rust Belt states, that he got a lot of the working class, and the working class used to be Democrats generally, like labor unions. And like all of those working class people used to be identified to the Democratic Party, but it is interesting that as time evolved, we started to call Democrats liberals, and what happens is you have to, that's an evolution, and now that group of people is under the borders of a new territory, and the definition that's describing them, so they actually lose something in the transformation from Democrat to liberal. They gain something and they lose something, because you have to, it's both of those, because they changed to become something else. So they lost some territory somewhere, and then they gained other territory, but it plays out across the entire country. Like, they gain some groups of people or some population here, and they lose some population here, and this happens over time. This happens election over election as different states flip to red and blue, based on a reflection of the parties that they're voting for and what fan bases the parties have at that moment in time. And an electoral map every 4 years is a different snapshot of territory that in people, population that both Republicans and Democrats had. There's there's coyotes, and there's coyotes making noise behind me, I think, unless they're just like, the woods are right behind me, and I think that there's a bunch of coyotes howling. So no big deal, just pretty cool place where I got, where there's it's not just me, it's me and the coyotes. Me and the Coyotes, pretty good band that I would maybe start, but probably won't. Me and the Coyotes. You can't really put me into a band name. Like, it, try to put an adjective and then the word me for any band name, and they all sound really bad. Like Adventurous Me, and then you're that band, and then you go up and you're like, hi, we're Adventurous Me. Or it's just you. What about Sassy Me? Do you think that that's a good band name? Hi, we're Sassy Me, and then you have to perform as that. Like, that's a lot to live up to. You better be really good, because otherwise everyone will be like, what the fuck? That is not acceptable. You actually thought you were sassy, but you weren't. Or, like, how do you tell people that you're sassy, and then you, like, up front, and then you have to make good on that? The only thing, the only things that you can make good on, that you're like, I'm this, are the things that you actually are. So you better be sassy. If you're like, I'm Sassy Me, you call yourself that. Hey, it's me, Sassy Me. Do you, time to get sassy. That's what you bring to the party. It's Sassy Me. Oh, my friend Sassy Me is coming to the party. Oh, Sassy Me's coming? Is Sassy Me gonna be there? I don't know. Like, for some reason that you like, somebody goes by that, or this is me playing this character. I guess that's probably funnier, right? I go to parties as Sassy Me, and just show up. It's like, it's not really a gimmick, but it's kind of more like a gift that I give. It's kind of more like a blessing that I share. It's one of my gifts, and because, like, God gave me the dream to be that for people so that they could see it, but only to spread love, so that there could be more love in people's hearts. And so I go to parties, and I'm like, it's Sassy Me, or Adventurous Me. Um, it's indigenous. It's solid me. Solid me, solid. This is like, I apologize for the stupidity of whatever I'm describing. I'm just describing a world where um, people go as characters to things because they already do that, but they're only ever their name the entire time. Like, people show up to embarrassing events, but as themselves. They, like, people will go to something that they know is embarrassing, and they won't even change their name beforehand. Then they go as themselves, and then what does that mean? That means that you, as a participant in life, are now going to this, like, if you went to Shrek on Ice, or whatever it is that they have for that, if you went to the Shrek the musical, I hope that they made Shrek on Ice, because that's even stupider than Shrek the musical. Like people go to that and they go as themselves. They don't even go unironically. They like show up with smiles on their faces, like excited to see it. They're like, we cannot rest until we see a man pretending, like a real man dressed in slime, pretending to be an ogre, singing and dancing in front of us. And it's like, it's not even a couple people that are doing this. They're like selling out arenas. And people still go and vote for Trump and they think that he can make America great again. It's like, well, but you know that there's this like touring Shrek the Musical, right? And people go unironically just as their own name. And they're like, tons of people are showing out. Like, this is really, you don't need to go to the polls because it's kind of over. But I'm just making political jargon. Um, mostly. Mostly just political jargon here. But what I'm saying is that liberals, when they became, Democrats, when they became liberals, when Democrats became liberals, you can't really do that with L because then it just becomes lil. It's interesting that by the year 2016, we're starting to call the Democrats liberals, or that's at least starting to take hold more and more. And I would say that they lose the working class as this happens. Working class are democratic, but democratic is a word for common people, and working class people are blue collar, or like that's more how they identify themselves. They're the working class, they're the common man, like they're the backbone of the country. And that does apply when they're identifying with the Democratic Party, the working class. And it's kind of 2016 when Trump wins all of them for the right. They just kind of end up falling in the conservative category at the point that the phraseology switches to liberal conservative, because it's like liberal describes like liberty or freedom, and working class doesn't really know liberty that much. Like they're more in slavery or something. They like liberty and words like that don't really describe them anymore. Not that it's like, oh, so conservative does. I don't really know, but they switched over to the Conservative Party and started identifying with that at the point that the Democratic Party became about liberty, because working class people in real life don't deal in liberty and freedom as much as the people who aren't like resigned to being in the working class. Because work, like 40-hour work week in the industries that they're in is like a lot more labor intensive. It's a lot closer to uh, like slavery or something than other things, than being very wealthy. There are levels of slavery, but that's why they're always like, slavery never ended. Now now black people are enslaved to like the new plantation is welfare or whatever it is, you know. um whatever happens with that. And uh just there's relative levels of slavery. It's almost like you can't say the word slavery because don't talk about slavery. I don't know. Probably not. You can talk about it. It's not that scary to say slavery. I've said it before multiple times, but the prison system is maybe one of those things that it's way too harsh. And I feel like prisons are a little bit otherworldly, where you do enough wrong and then you just go in this weird house where you're totally separate from everybody that you knew, and then you're just stuck in there. And the point is all of those things. The point is that that would be the worst, like it's like torture or something. That would be the worst thing. We're gonna put you in the place where we cut you off, like isolation. It's pretty it's really on the nose, like capturing people and then making it so that they're completely hidden when they do the worst things. It's like putting them all, well, we're gonna throw you all in this pit or like this house where that goes, where now we can't see you, you're hidden, because that would be the worst thing for you. It's like, it's torture. It's just that. I look at things like that, and that is why I think the people get more intelligent, or they get better over time. Quality of life improves over time, because the way that they used to torture people used to be a lot worse for prisoners like 1,000 years ago. Like, things just used to be more harsh and more physical with punishment, stuff like that, because we were, and some of it is just that we were stupid and thought that it was okay to do that, or we weren't looking at people and being like, oh, they would really hate to be tortured. Like, it's like at a time like that, like 1,000 years ago, when we're putting people on the stretching racks to stretch out their limbs or whatever, like, all they have all kinds of different torture methods across different cultures that are way crazier than what we're doing now. And so it seems like people get more humane over time. Um, but they're like, forget the point I was making. But it's just like, prison happens relatively. I think that as long as we're talking about police reform, where it's not really evident how you would be able to drastically reform police, because it would be appear evident that you need them in society. But and it's the same with prisons. People should talk about prison reform, or that we need to come up with a prison system where things are more temporary than it is this permanent, giant, permanent thing for time and location for that you'll do. I think that it should be more temporary, because that's more rational. It's just like, I'd say it goes more in the direction of archaic things like torture chambers and whatever, when it's like this harsh, like this idealistic, an image of something that's terrible, something that you wouldn't want to have happen. It's not as bad as torture, but I think that that's just because we've gotten smarter. But like, prisons is the new way that we divert that energy, that we used to divert it through these worser things. But I think we get more intelligent, and we come up with more words and mediums through which to divert our energy, so it doesn't have to be all uh, conglomerated into one space, like that we used to have. We used to have fewer ways of governing people, or politics itself, where politics is just like governances, or even borders between city, state, village, household. Like, the specification of definition just for governance, um, in politics, makes it so that there's actually a lot of ways to torture people now. But we became smarter. So it's like, but I'm just referring to a principle that when we first discover things, or it's like we just had a more generalized view of torturing people, and I don't know, or just of anger itself, or it's just more like people are just more like monkeys, where they're just gonna, like, if something happens that they don't like, they're gonna hit you over the head. Like, that's more torturing, or they like, people are just taking their anger out of their frustration, and it's not very intelligent, because they're just like, I'm gonna torture you in the worst way because you made me mad. So it's like, it's just stupider. But there's a lot of ways to govern, but like, the prison system, there's lots of ways of giving penalties to people, and now we do a lot of it through money and charging people for things. That way, it's like, that's another way in which we've gotten smarter, probably, is that more crimes are just paid off by the person who committed them. Or it's like the government just sees it as, well, we can benefit from people's crimes. And not that I mean, I'm sure that they've charged people through the ages, but what I'm just referring to, that there are a lot of different ways of governing it. Like, there's so many different rules we see in, because there's so many governances, there's so many polities, like city, town, state, and overlapping rules. There's lots of ways of there's lots of ways of incriminating people. That entire thing should be reformed. But like, just that there's so many rules to say so many different things are wrong. And I'm just saying that we've come up with very many more specified ways, derivatives, more specified ways of punishing people, or and so like the energy for that, it gets more diverted through all these different pathways. But I'm just talking about that happens for like everything, that when we first discover it, there's only a very little amount of data about it, and you're just like it's a stigmatized ignorant relationship that you would have to the things that you have not seen that much, haven't experienced that much, and don't have that much data on. But that's like everything that we uncover, whether it be a new word or a new scientific discovery, like a new element or anything. We know the least about it when we first see it, and when we first see it, there's only like one image of it or two. The same with like looking at black holes or something. We're pretty ignorant to it because we don't know what goes on, because we haven't been in one. We have like an image of it, and basically over time we just break down the image into all of these derivatives. But it's kind of like taking the energy that for the entire field, and then it gets diversified into all these different pathways. But like, because then you can come up with different fields of research within black holes, and it's like but all of the derivatives that are created say something about the initial power that the thing held. But I guess you don't really know what's, if black holes have the greatest future ever. We come to say that actually nebulous clouds are more important or something dumb like that, you know. Like it's not like black holes is trendy now, it's popular, and it might be the case that black holes are not interesting at all. And the only reason, and so there's a lot of ignorance, and that's the only reason why there is a community of people around black holes, because people don't realize the truth that they're actually vapid or something not interesting. And but like if we knew more about it, then I mean, probably if we knew more about it, there actually would be more people. But at least, but I'm just saying, like thousands and thousands of years into the future, when we know the in and out of a black hole, then it won't have any value for like money. It won't have any relevance, but it has a lot of relevance now because of its potential, because we don't know. I'm saying a few different things, but that aren't, they don't all go together for all the everything I just said in like the last 3 minutes. It's all true though. Um, yeah, like there's relatively prisons, and everything is relatively prison. Like your house that you live in is prison. Going to school is prison. It's a sentence. It's not as harsh as prison, and that's what prison is there. But there's lots of ways of being stuck in something. It's like being in boxes or whatever. But prison is the epitome of being stuck in a box, and it's like the culture of that is different from the culture of a bar. And you kind of have to act a certain way in a bar, and depending on how much you want to get into it, yeah. So like, why don't people be a character? So I was saying like people go as themselves to the thing their entire lives. But like, why don't we live in a world where you're just like, I'm this character for you could be that, like, and I'm just talking about something like artistic. um the way that things get artistic, it wouldn't be that surprising if in 50 years that is the world that people lived in, because like people realize that, oh, we're just playing characters all the time. But it's true though, because you see that this is happening with the identities of people, where people are just like, I'm a furry or anything, or you love horses, or you like people's elbows or whatever, and then that's what you are. But like that, everyone just identifies as any gender or any, like, oh, you can identify the whatever diversification of identifying yourself And why would this not extend to identifying yourself at a different every like day, every occasion you go to, like, oh, I identify as this. Why wouldn't that extend to um, identifying yourself differently at different times? Like, why the bias towards space? Or like, why the bias towards space, like lateral, where you can be a different thing? Like, I identify as any one of these different characters or animated things or fictional things or whatever, or genders or anything. All of these different ways of identifying yourself that are just kind of like different definitions. But then you don't need to be biased towards that, because you can also do it and say, I am different. Like, why wouldn't you give yourself the ability to identify 1,000 times? Like, I'm a new thing every 5 minutes. And also, it would extend to this, and then people would start doing it where they're just like, because you sort of are different all the time and you change all the time. But like, if people went really crazy or they got more artistic, like the way that Elon Musk or Grimes live, where they're just like, well, this, like, the way that it isn't supposed to go, the better. So like, the more artistic, the better, basically, because the world would say you can't just shoot a bunch of whatever satellites into space and like recreate the internet. But they're just like, yeah, well, of course you can, because whatever, we're naming our kid whatever, and like, just being crazy, whatever, as crazy as you can get. Why would the world not go in this crazy direction? But that's always what old people hate about what young people are doing, is that they're doing the things that they prohibited the most. Like, kids are always doing like, fashion is always going in the direction of the thing you're not supposed to do. And so why would things not get so crazy that we're like, oh, I'm this guy at the party. I don't want to be sassy me. I don't want to, not in real life. I'll show up and be like, yeah, I'm Mac Miller. Or something like that. Because, like, white people, and then my name starts with an M. And then all those white rappers are, like, yeah, because that's why my first name is Matt. That's why I said it. But for some reason, all the white rappers have M names. Mac Miller, Macklemore, Eminem, Machine Gun Kelly. Is there another one? Think to yourself. What, like, why they're all white, or all M? Can you explain that to me? Do you know the logic of that, for which that sentence from what it was saying? The logic of that sentence? I've heard it said before that, oh, I listened to your podcast and it sounded like you were high the whole time, for one of the episodes, apparently, that somebody listened to. And I really don't like, that's very rude. That's that's extremely rude. I would not want that said. Like, I'm just saying that it might be thought of that I would like to hear that or something. That's just, I find that rude. But it's fine. I don't need that. I don't really need that, like, feedback. I don't think you need to tell me that. That doesn't do anything, because, okay, great. I'm like a burning inferno of burning constructive criticism. Construction materials are constantly burning in the furnace of my mind as I hear them. Like, I'm an insatiable furnace consuming only constructive criticism. That's what I'm built on. And so it just pains the bottom of my heart to hear criticism that isn't constructive. Actually, though, like, criticism that isn't constructive is probably much better criticism, like, than the critic is doing their job. You know, constructive criticism, that's a myth, because it's barely criticism at the point that it's constructive. Like, a critic should be seen as a negative figure that's spewing criticism into the world. Criticism comes from critics. Like, if they're really going to criticize you, then, like, it has to mean something to criticize somebody, but that's the problem with the world that we live in, is that criticism just is at every level and is so hidden and passive aggressive, like cancel culture, and that cancel culture is difficult to define or pin down. Cancel culture is just the work of critics, but it's like it's just kind of an evolution of criticism, canceling, where it's, I mean, that one's kind of worse, right, than being critical, but maybe it's just that criticism is passe now. Like, criticism is dying, or being critical, and it died when everybody got to be a critic on YouTube and leave YouTube comments, and like just over inundation of criticism in all of the comment sections that we can read. And now it's kind of like we're overusing the resource of criticism, like I mean, or we're just kind of burning through the energy of that word. We're burning through what it has available, and like by talking about it, or like by exchanging in it, by using it a lot, and it causes us maybe to look for alternatives after a certain amount of time, especially when it's just free to make an alternative. We can discard criticism as a tool as soon as we want to, as people, throw it away like it's trash, and stop using it as a word if we wanted to, because it's not like we have this emotional attachment to it. And so it's like the free market of ideas is a good way of probably a more optimal way of describing the free market of ideas. It's just words themselves, and that it's like words become popular, and then that says a certain thing about culture. And sometimes you can look to the word, like maybe canceling is it's just kind of what criticism is now, because of we're like there are words that we're like using them up a lot. And the Onion had this video once about that we were using up Miley Cyrus as like she is this commodity, and the Onion video is like we like it's irregularly high, the levels at which we are using up like the Miley Cyrus energy, and that she's just gonna do, but they pretty much predicted her future, or it's like it was kind of right at the time maybe where she was starting to do some crazy things, and the Onion was saying that she's just gonna like fall off the map like child stars do, or that we're like burning through the usage of it way too quickly. And it's kind of like that, but a culture does do that with celebrities, and some at a faster rate than others. And we do that with some words. Like, words are fads where they could just be in use for a year, and then they're out of use, and then you don't hear them ever again. Like, they spike, like they're quick fads sometimes, but because the energy is such that we burn through it at so fast a rate. Like the Island Boys is all that is just one very quick spike up, and then back down. Like, I'll get ahead of myself now and say I could be wrong. Maybe they're like the most talented people on earth, the Island Boys, and they come back in like a year from now with something that you've never thought they could do. Obviously, they would have to change it up completely, where they weren't talking about islands anymore, if they really want to evolve. Like, if they they have more depth of character than what you'd think. So I'm not saying their careers are over, but it's like it should be that this is almost like a Rebecca Black situation. It's like that's obviously the thing you'll be known for the most, but it's like identifiability, and it's kind of weird because like they would have been asking for the fame, but it's like be careful what you wish for if it's a spike that happens that quickly. Not that, I mean, maybe they're grateful for what happened or what, like, or they don't care. I don't know. But there it's just like, oh, we burn through whatever is valuable about that, but it's like data. Like we need to consume something, and we are on the internet, and the internet is like this inferno that feeds us all of this data that we're like, alongside the way that we have to consume food, we have to consume, or we are anyway, we're like this insatiable furnace, consuming information from the internet, and like we need people like the Island Boys, and that helps mitigate the situation, or it's like that feeds some people for a short period of time. Like that was a nice contribution, the Island Boys. Like you fed the entire world for an hour or something, so we did need that hour. It's like people are kind of just filling up space in that way, filling up time. Where it's like at certain times, someone will need to rise up for other people to consume the content. Somebody will need to say something, or else the feeding frenzy. But I guess it doesn't have to be that way, where we're like, oh, it's so dependent on the internet. But it's like technology and a direction we're headed that we can't escape from, and it's only getting worse. We're only getting more data centric. Like we're only making shorter and shorter videos, and increasing our ability to perceive frequency itself, like rate of, like within an hour we can watch so many more videos that are self-contained stories, like TikToks, in the course of an hour, versus YouTube. Now we can, at a much faster frequency, watch these videos, but it's like a way that says something about our perception of time itself. It influences the way we perceive time, where time is only just a perception, because it doesn't exist as any specific thing. It doesn't exist absolutely. It's just the way that we perceive it. And really our perception of time is speeding up, you know, with our consuming TikToks versus YouTube. But then like YouTube versus just when we had cable TV, the frequency in this, like the data rate is increasing, and it's only getting worse, and we're only just getting more. And so like where our need for data, or the need for content, is probably only increasing. Like it's probably just becoming more valuable. I don't know that that's for certain. Like content in and of itself maybe is becoming more valuable, just because you can watch Tommy Boy over and over and over again if you wanted to, that movie, because it's just available forever now. But when they made it, they were like, oh, this will go to the theaters, and then it'll go to DVD. I mean, then it'll go to VHS, and then whatever, then people forget about it. But like everything that gets made is just viewable by everybody forever. But it has to do with immutability, and that we become more immutable in certain an area. But like when you make something and then it's on the internet, it is immutable. Like it can be taken down, so it's not all the way immutable. Like a word like immutable is kind of more absolute, and so it's more difficult to conceptualize that it exists relatively immutable, because immutable is supposed to be unchangeable, but it's just things are relatively unchanging. Yeah, like maybe unchanging is something that people should think about rather than changing. Like change gets so much press. What about unchange? Unchanging, constantness, immutability, things, because that's why it's difficult for those things that I just described. Is like immutable is constant, and it's difficult for us. It's difficult to say that something is relatively constant when constant is supposed to be constant. It's just stupidity, like lack of intelligence in this area, because people don't use the word unchanging enough or immutable enough. Most, like I said, it's most of the press is for change, and most of the songs are for change, and we're influenced through change and thinking about that word and what it means, and like cultures that form and periods of time that are more tied in with change, or that find change more significant. They exemplify change, or they amplify change. Like the 60s amplifies change because it is a culture of the time period, rather than like versus a culture that you could find, like the Russian culture, like one that you could find via location. Like there's cultures per decade, and then there's cultures per territory, like country. No, like we don't talk about immutability enough, and so because of that, we don't have as many images to really say to ourselves that it exists relatively. Talk about that constantness can be relative, because constantness maybe is just motion, and motion is like always relative because everything moves at different rates. And but like there's so many different ways of being constant. Like a rate, any rate can be constant. Like it could be a constant rate of 40 miles an hour versus a constant rate of 2 miles per second, and or whatever you wanted to use. And every rate that you can describe it as constant. So constant, like, I don't know, is that how you would be able to say that they're all relative? It's sort of like that. Like constantness, things are relatively immutable, and um like when you put something on the internet now, because it ends up in a place where you can, like, for years and years after, as long as you've heard about it, you can buy it. Like now it's all available. It speaks to the immutability of content itself, or of creations themselves, because somebody will make a YouTube video about like famous sculptures from the 8th century, and then sculptures that people made live on, but sort of are immutable. They're like permanently on the internet. Not that videos can't be taken down. It's just that they're more immutable than they used to be when we lived in a world where things weren't documented as much. It's like, because all of this shit is recorded, there's all this documentation, and it's just become, things overall just become more permanent. But like artifacts, works of art become more permanent. Things in history, cultures in history become more permanent than they used to be, because they're all like available, accessible to everybody. Like they become more immutable through being on the internet. A lot of just through documentation, increase in documentation and permanence, and like people's stories themselves. Like people go on Joe Rogan and they exchange all these stories with Joe Rogan. Like they'll exchange stories for 3 hours, and now all of those stories are like permanently somewhere. Now, like I know that they can be removed, but like, especially if you consider that it gets to the point where we record everything, just like the Black Mirror episode. If this increases, then we start recording everything, because it's like more and more everything is recorded, and because of that, anybody's story or account of things is actually documented. And if it is videoed, it's like it's almost permanent and on the internet. It's like, because it's documented for everybody to see, all of this evidence can come out about it, and it's on display, and it's just less secretive. Everything is less secretive, and people's stories are just like documented more. And what I'm talking about, whatever, I'm trying to make a point. I didn't really want to get that serious about it, but I went into serious world, and that's not as fun. Like, oh, I'm making a really serious point. Like I'm trying to say something of some amount of like finality, but I just am not getting around to it. I'm just trying to say that about immutability itself. So I'm building it up, and throwing a lot of just like filler in there. I don't really know. Like my point was going to be that things are immutable, and they're kind of constant. But like cryptocurrencies, they're defined by their immutability, and it's kind of like, with the emergence of cryptocurrencies, is companies that, it's kind of like the story of a cryptocurrency is not even a story. And I'm talking about the enterprise itself, or like the community that centers around it. Like Chase Bank as exists more in the world as far as anybody knows it. Like popularly, people know more about Chase Bank than they do about a cryptocurrency. And Chase Bank is like it's this corporation that they have these mission statements and shit like quotes that they have to put on their walls that are propagandizing towards their company that make their company look good, and advertising and stuff like that. And they have like this mission statement, and all of their employees are bonded behind some unified mission, and it has to do with that this company was started by this guy or this handful of people and with these goals in mind. And now look what resulted is this major company, like as if there's manifest destiny about the company existing, and every company acts like this, like they're God's gift to earth. Like the miracle that ensued from the vision that started by this couple of people, and now look what it's blossomed into. Clearly this was only divine intervention. This is kind of how they act. And there's like mission statements and logos and like mottos that are really pro the company. And I'm just saying how the way the companies exist now, it's like this story of their thing. It's like this story or this narrative, but at the point that banks are just cryptocurrencies are just programs on computers and have no emotion. And it's just speaks to their the relative immutability. It's the same with like if you allow immutability to increase, you kind of lose some human emotion or feeling when everything is made permanent. Is something like that, but it's just a world that's becoming more computerized or more digital, or we're all sending ourselves into virtual worlds that are run or created by computer programs. Computer programs are more like cryptocurrencies are more immutable than banks. They're more unchanging and they're more documented because of that's like at the root of blockchain technology, is that the blockchain is the chain of transactions, and then they're all permanently one giant ledger of all of the transactions that happened, but they're permanently stuck in there. But like banks also need a certain permanence. It's just that they feed off of like a story, and the story acts as a buffer or a mediator between them and the public so that they are like approachable and personal. Corporations, physical, banks that need physical locations, that there's a like you they need to draw you to them also, rather than that you can sit at your home and interact with a computer program. Like the technology or the era that we lived in or have been living in, like physical places, it benefits them a lot to have this relatable story. But like cryptocurrencies are more immutable characteristically. I guess I won't go into all this is why they're immutable. I've probably described it. I don't need to do that. I'm just saying cryptocurrencies are more immutable, and they're also just heartless computers. Additionally, sick, an hour, 3 minutes. I don't like everything that I said in that hour. I'm thinking back and I'm like, oh, you should have been more, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Because those are lies. Those are lies that I'm telling myself. There are a couple things I said in the beginning that I would have liked to return to maybe, but I sort of forgot. But that doesn't matter. Goodbye now.